welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to cover how to stack a buttercream cake and decorate it suitable for a wedding or any celebratory occasion. Now, as you may have seen, I've already done a stacking cake tutorial, which some of you have found really helpful, but it was with a naked cake. And I think stacking a fully coated buttercream cake is a totally different ball game. It is not easy, but it is possible, and I'm here to show you exactly how to do it. So as you can see, I don't have my cake in front of me just yet because I need to do some preparations beforehand. So what I do have are several size cake boards, which I'll go through the details in a minute. I have a drill, and I know you're probably thinking, how is this a cake decorating tool? It's to drill holes in these cake boards, which I'll show you quite soon. And I've got some straws and a central dowel, and I also have a new guide which I can't wait to show you as well. So when it comes to stacking a cake, there can never be sponge and buttercream holding other sponge and buttercream. So the cake has supports in, such as the straws, and each tier is on its own cake board. So the first thing we need to do is prepare some cake boards. So I've got a 6-inch and a 4-inch cake board. So these are the same sizes as my two top tiers of the cake. And I've also got two reusable boards that they're going to sit on. But before I do anything, I need to drill a hole in the center of these two boards to fit the central dowel inside. And this is where this amazing guide comes in. So Lissy Lou have created this incredible product, which I think every cake maker was wanting without realizing. And it's a guide to show you where the center of a cake board is so you can mark it and drill through it. So on here, it has all the different sizes and exactly where the centers of the sizes are. So this is my 6-inch, and if I place it directly under the guide and line it up perfectly, I can see, and I will mark, exactly where the center of the 6-inch board is. And now I can see where the center of the 6-inch board is, and I'm going to do the same with the 4-inch. Mark the center. And I've put the link to this amazing product in the description box of the video, so please go ahead and check one out. And I believe they ship globally, so wherever you are in the world, your life is about to be saved. So now I know where the center of the board is, I can now drill the hole. So I'm going to place it over this container, get the drill, and point it exactly where I marked it, which is center, and drill a hole through. And the container also catches all the extra bits coming off. And of course, you just want to make sure that it is big enough for the stick to go through, which it is, so I can do the exact same thing on the 4-inch. And I can already see that the two holes of each board perfectly line up. And so these boards with the holes in are the boards that are going to go directly under each tier. And so in order to decorate the cakes, I'm going to attach them to these larger boards just with a bit of tape. So I'm going to loop the tape around and place it down. So now that board won't go anywhere when I'm stacking up my cake. Right, so now these boards are ready for the cakes, which have been chilling in the fridge to get nice and firm. So I'm going to go and bring them and show you how to prepare them. So what I prepared in advance is my 4-inch cake sandwiched with buttercream. Now what I did, I actually built it up in the tin with some acetate surrounding it to get it nice and cold. And I love doing this technique to make the cake as straight and as level as possible. I covered this technique in my basic or back to basic wedding cake tutorial. So if you don't know how to do this, you can always head to my YouTube and check that tutorial out. Or I've also got a few clips on Instagram as well if you did want to see how it's done. The best thing about this technique is that you can actually cut the crumb coat stage because, especially if you've used the freezer, the crumbs kind of solidify to the cake, and if you're careful, you can go over the second layer of buttercream without doing the crumb coat. But I'll show you what I mean. What I need to do now though is actually transfer this cake directly onto the cake board that I just prepared. And you can see that the smaller cake board is the same size as the cake. So I'm going to place this onto my turntable, and here I've just got some of my plain white Swiss meringue buttercream, and I'm going to pipe a little bit of buttercream onto the surface of the cake board, and that's just going to be used to stick the cake down. Now I can get the cake and place it directly onto that cake board and lift up the tin. And what's left behind is a perfectly straight cake. So I'm going to take off this acetate. And I did keep the paper on the very top because I wanted it to come out of the tin. And now I can go on with my second layer of buttercream. So because there's no crumb coat, I want to make sure that the second layer is quite nice and thick. So I'm going to really squeeze on that buttercream to get a good layer and pipe my way up the sides of the cake, keeping that pressure even, so the same amount of buttercream is all the way around the cake. And the great thing about piping on this buttercream is that you do ensure an even layer on the outside. I'm going to do the very top as well. And before I go and smooth the sides, I want to get that top nice and flat. So with the side of my palette knife and rotating the turntable, I'm going to flatten out the top. And any excess buttercream I can keep. And now go around the sides with my side scraper, but with very little pressure. So I don't want to be taking off this buttercream, I want to be smoothing it out. Again, if you're careful, no crumbs will be in this layer. A few slower times around the cake just to smoothen out that final finish. So, something I forgot to mention as well is that when I'm doing a tiered cake, I actually like starting off with the smaller tier because that's going to be going on last and it's the most fiddly. So I want this to get as cold as possible, which is why I started off with the 4-inch rather than the 6 or 8-inch. So I'm going to set this in the freezer. You can see that I've left the corners rough. Because it's going in the freezer, I might as well get them nice and sharp. So I'm going to put this one in the freezer and get my 6-inch cake. So my 6-inch cake was prepared the exact same way as the 4-inch cake, and this cake is going to go onto this board, so the silver board is the same size as the 6-inch cake. So once again, I'm going to place some buttercream down onto the board, and this cake was a little bit shorter than the acetate, so I'm going to take it out the tin and place it directly onto that smaller cake board. Remove the acetate. You can really see how much straighter it is when you do use that acetate technique. And once again, go on with this second layer of buttercream, nice and thick, starting from the bottom and working my way up the sides of the cake. All the way to the top. With my palette knife, I'm just going to flatten out that top, turning my turntable and using the side of the palette knife to create a nice, flat, even top. And now I can go around the sides with the scraper and smoothen out that buttercream. Once again, I'm leaving the corners rough. I'm going to cut them after the freezer. This is going to go in the freezer for a good 20 minutes, and I'm going to decorate the 8-inch, which is my largest tier of this cake. So this 8-inch cake is going to be the base layer of my 3-tier cake, and I've crumb coated this just like usual. I forgot to say that if you did want to crumb coat your other tiers just to be on the safer side, then you need to build them up on that smaller cake board. So the one that you drilled the hole in, sellotape that to the larger cake board and then build the cake layer straight on top of that cake board. Because I built them in the tin, I stuck it on after. But this bottom layer doesn't need an extra cake board underneath. So I've got a slightly larger clear one on here. You can use a cake drum or something a bit more decorative if you're going to be displaying the cake on this. So what I'm going to do now is just go directly on with that second layer of buttercream, using the piping bag just like I did on the other tiers. Starting from the bottom and all the way up the cake. Just spread that buttercream out just like I did before. And what I like doing with the larger tiers is actually use my side scraper to make sure the top's nice and flat. So I don't push a lot, I just glide the weight of the scraper over the top. And that kind of acts like a large palette knife. If you've got a large palette knife, you can also do that too. But I do like finishing it off with the palette knife to get that smooth finish. And now around the sides. And I always finish off with these slower motions to get that smoother finish. The sides are straight and smooth. Once again, I've left the corners because this is going to get nice and cold and I can trim them off sharp. Now, the biggest, most important thing to remember when you're doing a buttercream coated cake, especially when you're stacking it, is to have the cakes as cold as possible. So even if that means you want to spread the cake decorating process over a few days and have them sit in the fridge overnight, just so the buttercream isn't ruined when you start stacking them. So I've got a freezer to help speed up the process. So I'm going to put this in the freezer before I do any doweling or trimming corners or anything. I want the buttercream cold, and therefore you're not going to ruin your cake as much. It's really important to remember that. So I'm going to put this in the freezer for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to trim off the corners and prepare it for stacking. All right, so bottom tier, completely cold. The buttercream is nice and firm, so I'm going to start by trimming off the corners with a sharp knife. So slowly, I'm just going to glide the knife around the edges and lift up the excess buttercream. And I've got my excess buttercream bowl next to me. So I'm cutting the corners until it's totally flush with the top of the cake, because I don't want to see any ledges or anything. So now it's time to make this as stable as possible, because 2 more tiers of cake are going to sit on top of it. So this is where the straws and dowels come in. So I've got a center dowel. This is best for when you're traveling with the cake or if it's going to another destination. It avoids the cake from tilting and it just is a lot more secure. Usually for 2-tiered cakes, I wouldn't really bother using a central dowel, but if you feel more comfortable doing it, then absolutely do. We want to put this as central as possible, so I'm going to use the guide once again. I'm going to place the guide this time on top of the cake, and because the cake is cold, doesn't matter that the guide touches it. And because there's buttercream on it, it is slightly larger than the 8-inch. So I'm going to line it up and then with a toothpick, mark where the middle is. Now I can see where the center is, I can put the dowel. Make sure it's straight. That looks good. And now I'm going to go in with some straws. So these straws are going to act as even more support for the tier. But these aren't going to stay this height. I'm going to cut them to the same height as the cake. But what I want to do is insert each straw first, and then I'll cut them to size afterwards. So I like using brightly coloured straws, just so they're as obvious as possible for the person who's going to be cutting the cake. So I've got 5 straws in this tier, and now I can trim them to size. So I like to give it a little wiggle to mark where the buttercream finishes, pull it up a little bit, trim with scissors, and press it back down. So it's flush against the top of the cake. And I can't stress enough how important it is for the cake to be cold at this point, especially because you're now going in with your fingers. And it's these straws that are going to hold that cake board that's under the 6-inch, which is going to go next. So this cake is ready to go, but I need to trim the corners from the 6-inch cake first. So I'm going to put this back in the fridge so it stays cold. Once again, so important for the cake to be as cold as possible, especially because we're going to start adding our other tiers. So 6th tier from the freezer, again buttercream's firm, so I'm going to chop off the corners, same as last time. Obviously there's not going to be a central dowel in this right now because this is going to fit on top of the one that I did previously, but I do want to put the straws in this tier because it's going to be holding the 4-inch on top. Now a 4-inch cake is a very small and light cake, so only 2 straws is more than enough, but I obviously don't want to put them in the center, so I'm going to space them out a little bit. One on this side and one here. Cut and push down. So this is ready to stack, but I still need to do the corners of the 4-inch. So I'm going to put this back in the freezer, get nice and cold, and then do all the stacking when all of the cakes are completely cold again. Finally, the 4-inch, nice and small. I love this size. Cut the corners off. And because the 4-inch is the top tier, it's not going to have any cake balancing on top of it, so it doesn't need any dowels or anything. I'm just going to put this back in the freezer and get on with the larger cakes. Okay, finally, the stacking stage. So bottom tier, ready, doweled, ready to go. I've put all my excess buttercream into a smaller piping bag, and we need some glue in between the tiers, so I'm just going to pipe a little bit of buttercream just around the center of that dowel. And now I'm going to take off this cake. With my palette knife, I like to go underneath and try and detach it from the tape that was keeping the 2 boards together. Lift it up. Now you can probably see why it's better to have a cold cake. Take off the tape and line it up with the holes and then carefully drop the cake downwards. And hopefully the dowel will come up through the center of the cake, like so. Just gonna remove this bit of excess. Sometimes it can get a bit crummy and some of the buttercream may come off a little bit, but that has come up directly in the center. That looks great. So obviously we have a little gap around the middle here. So this is where the extra buttercream comes in. I've cut a really small hole in the piping bag, and I'm just gonna go around that very bottom edge and fill it in. So obviously if you were doing any colored cake, you would do exactly the same as this. But you don't wanna be putting too much on, because now we will go over with the scraper. But I'm gonna just focus around that very bottom edge and take off any excess. And because the cake is cold, it shouldn't get affected too much. All right, now I'm gonna get the 4-inch cake. So 4-inch cake, nice and cold. Before it goes on, I want to put a little bit of buttercream around the top for that cake to stick to. Remove the board from the other board, take off the tape, line up the hole once again. There we go. And because it's cold, I actually like using this harder board to press on the top and try and align it as much as I can. There, that looks really good. Extremely central. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing around the very bottom edge of this tier. And then with the scraper. Perfect. So because it's wedding season, we're in the summer and I'm doing a tiered cake, I'm going to decorate this like a wedding cake with some fresh flowers. So I'm going to grab the flowers and show you how I finish this off. So what I've prepared are some fresh flowers. I've shown over the years multiple ways how to attach fresh flowers to your cake if they're not edible. Here's a really quick and easy way of doing it. I've left one unprepared just to show you. So I've cut the stem fairly short of the flower, and all I'm going to do is insert a toothpick to the end. So this works really well with larger flower heads because you can actually insert the toothpick right into the stem. But if you want to do smaller bunches of smaller flowers, you just wrap the stems around the toothpick with the florist tape, which comes next. So florist tape doesn't appear sticky straight away, but it gets sticky as you work with it. So with the florist tape, I'm going to wrap the stem around the tape and then attach it to the toothpick. So the florist tape prevents any leakage from the flower coming onto the cake, but essentially it's just going to be the toothpick inserting to the cake anyway. So this is a really easy and safe method to attach flowers to the cake. So I've got all of these flowers here, and I've also got some lovely leaves as well, and I'm just going to go on with a nice little waterfall and then some gold leaf to finish. By placing the toothpick directly into the cake like this, and then go on with the remaining flowers at different angles. And I'm just going to finish off with some touches of gold leaf. And there we have it, a 3-tier fully buttercream coated cake. I hope you found this tutorial helpful and got over any fears that you may have had when making tiered buttercream cakes. If you have any suggestions of any other tutorials that you want to see on my channel, then please write in the comment box below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and of course like this video too. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you very soon.